What we're going to cover in this session is a number of different things. Michelle and I have been talking about this session now for quite some time. Sometimes we get busy and we finally just set the date and pull this together. So ultimately, we're going to start with just a bit of a background on who vSure is and what we're all about. We're going to talk about how to get help, and I do note that this is changing, so we just want to bring that to your attention. We will cover off best practice. We do have some customers who've been using us now for over a decade, and not everyone is aware of or familiar with modern day best practice. So we'll have a discussion about that. We will cover off a series of FAQs, which are the most frequently asked questions of the help desk. And we'll jump into reporting, talk about various reports and how to get the information from the system that you need. We'll also talk extending on that into custom reports and integrations. We'll talk about some of the new features in the last few months that you may have missed. Talk about options to enhance your vSure that you may or may not be aware of, and effectively finish with a question and answer session at the end, which may get a little out of hand with this many people on, but we'll see how we go with that. Always worth a try. So let me start with a bit of a background. Our founder is this gentleman, guy by the name of Mark Webster, Dr. Mark Webster now. He is a PhD in quantum computing now. Mark was the president of the Migration Institute of Australia, dating back to 2012, when the government proposed the legislation that really underpins why vSure exists. It was called the Migration Amendment Act. Up until July 1, 2013, employers basically got a slap on the wrist if they were found to be employing people in breach of their work rights. From the 1st of July 2013, this piece of legislation really shifted the onus of responsibility onto the employers, you guys, to make sure that you're managing the work rights of your staff. At the time, Mark made some submissions to Home Affairs, and long story short, ended up getting a license agreement with Home Affairs to build vSure and get access to the visa information that really underpins the vSure platform. vSure does nothing but work rights and visa checks. We laser focus on that, and we feel that gives us best of breed competitive advantage in the marketplace over people who might do more than just work rights. We're now automating well over 2 million visa checks annually. Those have been with us for a long time. That number used to be 10,000, then it became 50,000, 100,000. Now we're getting well over the 2 million mark. And looking at last month was 43% larger than August of 2024. So we're growing very, very rapidly at the moment, hence why sessions like this are more and more important. Let's just talk about the legislation briefly. If you do want to go away and do your own research, you can. Ultimately, the Migration Amendment Act has subsequently had a few amendments to it, and importantly was one in 2023 called the Migration Amendment Strengthening Employer Compliance Bill. The fines went up astronomically at that point, and so the fines in Australia can be as large as $1.485 million per offence, and an offence is one employee working in breach of their visa conditions. It's very interesting also that the Department of Home Affairs is now receiving data from the ATO. So with single touch payroll that came in a few years ago, your data goes on a pay cycle basis to the ATO, who then on shares it to Centrelink, and Centrelink have a department called the Data Sharing Program. They then on share that to Home Affairs, and they're moving to basically real-time audits. What you will have seen is if you accidentally put a working holiday maker 462 or 417 on the wrong tax scale in your payroll program, you'll get a letter within a week telling you they're on the wrong tax scale. And the reason for that is Home Affairs and ATO sharing this data. They've subsequently come out and said that they'll be using that data for automation of auditing of work rights. New Zealand, for those of you who are now using a New Zealand product, it is the Immigration Act 2009, but also more importantly, the Worker Protection Act of 2023. The fines are remarkably smaller, $1.485 million compared to 3,000 New Zealand dollars, but there are other consequences such as being banned from employing migrants and things like that. Ultimately, compliance is about reasonable steps at reasonable times. We get often asked, what does that actually mean? Our advisory board says a right to work check within 2 weeks of someone starting would be reasonable steps at reasonable times. Our advisory board talks about the fact that bridging visas can have a decision made any day, and our advisory board advises bridging visas and student visas, which there were something like 18,000 student visas cancelled last year, and there continues to be a crackdown on student visas in Australia. They really should be checked on a monthly basis, and the majority of our clients are automating the checking of their temporary visas on a monthly basis. But ultimately, something that's come up a bit recently is right to work applies to everyone. How do you know if someone's an Australian citizen? Well, they're supposed to prove it, and the citizenship process is built into the vSure platform as much as the visa checking process. Ultimately, there are additional compliance steps that our clients are needing to take. If they do state-based sponsorships, a number of the states will require you to report on visas held over time. Similarly, the labour hiring companies that are using our platform, and that seems to be growing every day, there is a visas held report required in Queensland and Victoria for your licensing in those states, and that is a report that we create or have for you. And those of you who are supplying the likes of Coles and Woolworths, there is a SEDEX meter audit, and these go above and beyond what would be considered sort of compliance. So there are enhanced elements within that we would argue aren't part of the legislation, but they are part of the SEDEX meter audit. So they're just things to be aware of from a compliance perspective. Now, how to get help from vSure. For the last sort of decade, we've been using a system called Zendesk. We are in the process of moving to HubSpot. What will happen is you will notice that if you do use the hamburger menu in vSure, which is that 3 horizontal lines in the top right corner of your screen, you'll see there's a contact support there to be able to log support tickets. Most of the people on this call are familiar with that. That link will continue to operate, but it will change over the next couple of days. It will change from a Zendesk link to help.vsu.re/tickets. You can go direct to that new URL from today in order to lodge a ticket. Or we are also going to change, or we have changed, that you can lodge tickets now via help@vsure.com.au. For our New Zealand clients, that will be help@vsure.co.nz. Ultimately, that will automatically come into our HubSpot ticketing system. From the ticketing system, you'll be able to see all your tickets and log in to the customer portal and see past tickets that have been closed, etc. Online help remains in Zendesk for now. We are working on a project to convert that across into HubSpot. So for now, the question mark in the top right corner of your vSure screen remains our online help system for your manual for vSure, so to speak. As we transition that across into HubSpot, we are trying to update and rewrite those articles. So it will take us literally a year to really update the whole system, but that will start to transition. And the best way to access that will continue to be via the question mark. But in future, you will see that basically move to help.vsu.re/knowledge, but we will advise of when that date is. It probably won't be in the next month or so. It'll probably later in the year before we fully get to a point that we've transitioned that across. But yes, so the question mark and the hamburger menu, the best ways to get help or to look up the online menu at this point. Let's talk about some fundamentals of vSure, and this is by far and away the most common reason we get support tickets today. It did change in March. So up until March, it really didn't matter where you logged into vSure from. Whatever URL you could find that had a vSure login screen would allow you to log in. But due to a change in security and change in the way that our login system worked from March, we are finding clients trying to log into the wrong place a lot. It is by far and away our number one reason for support tickets at the moment. by a factor of probably 5 to 1.
Did you buy?
Now, some people might say, well, why don't you change it back to what it was? Well, there's very good security reasons and other reasons why we have done it. Fundamental technical reasons. All we need to do is educate our clients that your URL that we bring to your attention that you log into is the only way to log into vSure for your company. Now, those of you who are running multi-account, you'll have your own dedicated domain. It'll be something like companyname.vsure.com.au. I know we've got a number of Tanda clients on the call where they are using Tanda all-in-one. You have a dedicated Tanda URL, which is tanda.vsure.com.au. Others are using some of our partners, migration agents and background check companies as the partner who's supporting their vSure. There would be a dedicated partner.vsure.com.au. For everyone else, if you are a single account and you basically contracted direct to vSure, then the standard webapp.vsure.com.au is how you log into the system. And you can go to our public website and click on the link and log into there. But we do say, if you onboard new people into your TA team or your HR team, please make them aware and get them to bookmark your dedicated URL, because it is the only way to get into vSure. You can't get into vSure via just Googling vSure. You also can't get into vSure by going to the URL that pops up in your bar. If you go to login.vsure.com.au because it's saved in your address bar, it will never work because it doesn't know what URL you've come from, right? So you need to come from your dedicated URL for the system to know which organization you're logging into. And it is related to security, it's related to single sign-on, it's related to a number of technical reasons why you have to log in from your dedicated URL. Hopefully that makes sense to people. Hopefully everyone knows what their URL is and you do bookmark it and are aware of that moving forward. Another thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, in the top right corner of your vSure, and we will jump into vSure in a minute, is a little bell. We've been asked, what's that bell? Well, the bell is bringing to your attention any bounced emails. So in theory, if you have a number against that bell, there's unread messages in there about emails that have bounced. So if you, for example, if our integration has brought across an email address from your other system, but the email address was wrong, you might get some bounced emails. Or if you've accidentally keyed in an email address wrong, you might get some bounced emails. That's what the bell in the top right corner is. If it's got a little red number against it, that's how many bounced emails are there. I do recommend opening that up and marking them as red once you've dealt with the bounced emails, so that everyone in the organization knows that those emails are getting dealt with. If you just let the number sort of build up over time, it means that you're not actually dealing with the bounces, if that makes sense. I will jump into vSure for this. One of the other questions that we get a lot is around notification and reports sent from the system. Notification and reports are down to the individual user of the platform. And it is at sub-account level, or if you've only got a single account, it is at your account level. So when I log into vSure, I'm going to bring my screen up and bring it across onto here. I come into the My Account area and you'll see the notification settings. So let's talk through each of these different settings within the notification. Again, I stress this is the individual user of the system. This doesn't apply across all of your account. And I stress again, if you're running multi-account, it applies at the sub-account level, not at the top level. Okay, so if I come in and I hit edit here, subscribe to reports. Okay, there is a report that vSure runs every time it does a bulk temporary visa check. Okay, we call it the regular report. The regular report is a setting within your My Account settings, and you'll see here that it's report frequency, which I've currently got turned off because this is my demo data. But the report frequency is either weekly, fortnightly, monthly, or quarterly. In 99% of vSure customer cases, it's a monthly report. And the report is this one, the visa check batches report. Okay, every month for most of you, the system is going to run a recheck of all temporary visas, and it's going to generate this particular report, which is the status as at a point in time of all of your visa holders and workers in the system, and effectively what their right to work status was as at that point in time. This is a report we're finding more and more customers starting to put into board packs because directors are personally liable for work rights. A number of board of directors members are starting to ask for, well, I need evidence every board meeting that we are keeping on top of it. So that's effectively the first notification is subscribe to reports. That's the report that you're subscribing to. And if you say yes to that, that's basically going to send you that report if it's set up for monthly, every month. It doesn't send you the report as an attachment. It sends you the report as a hyperlink because the data contained within that report is highly sensitive. So you will need to basically log into vSure to access it, but it will take you to the most recent report. Passport expiry reminders. I would typically recommend to say no to this. It can actually set up Outlook calendar notifications if you did want to really track it. But the vSure Alerts report came along a bit later, and the vSure Alerts report actually contains the passport expiries within it. The dashboard within vSure also contains the passport expiries. So in most cases, my recommendation, unless you want the specific alerts around passport expiries, it is contained within the alerts report, which I'll talk about in a moment. The delivery of those reports can be via email, which is the default, or you can basically have it also go to your mobile number, which is the option here. Most people will get the reports delivered via email. Now, review onboarding alerts. If you are using self-onboarding within vSure, then effectively you can subscribe to an alert every time someone completes the self-onboard. Yes means every single person that onboards, you will get an alert, an email. Only the onboards that I send. So if you do have a team of people and you are manually triggering the onboards, then only the onboards that I send will alert you to the ones that you've sent. Now, if you're using integration or bulk upload for that, then effectively that's not necessarily going to work if you're not manually sort of triggering those onboards yourself. Alternatively, if you say no because you're logging into vSure all the time, you won't get any alerts. What some of our clients do is one of the team will say yes to that, but they'll put in here the HR at or the TA at email address, so that basically only one of the team is subscribing, but it's sending it to the group inbox. Email alerts is this report. When you go reports, alerts, this report is always live as of now, and it's going to bring to your attention anyone in critical status, anyone in important status that really needs attention, which is typically those whose work rights have changed between last check and the most recent check. Anyone whose work rights need attention at important status will come into. Not all important appear in this alerts report. If you use the system to set reminders, now I'll just show you against an employee in vSure, you can come in and set yourself a reminder. Now, why would you use reminders? An example could be this person is on a TSS visa and you want to help them with the pathway to permanent residency, and that is in 2 years from today. You could come in here and you could basically set a reminder for 2 years from today to instigate the permanent residency application process. You may have people on a 407 training visa with a certain obligation towards the amount of money spent on them per year on training. You might want to send a reminder around those obligations. You may also have someone who's promised to get you a copy of their new passport by a certain date. You can set reminders for yourself. So the reminders is a great way of just basically having these little triggers, and it does appear on the alerts report. The other thing that appears, and I mentioned this before, is any passport expiries. If you are tracking passport expiries, it's a good way to keep on top of preventing the system in moving into critical once an employee has transferred their visa onto their new passport. Just keep in mind that the employee does need to advise Home Affairs if they do get a new passport of the change of passport, and that the new visa won't, or the visa won't appear on the new passport until they have made that notification to Home Affairs. Okay, so that's notifications. The next thing I want to bring to your attention is the emails. If you are using self-onboarding in vSure, the emails and SMSs are customizable by you at sub-account level. So each of your accounts, you have the ability to come in and effectively tailor this. You'll see I've been working with a couple of clients. I'll just change the name there. But ultimately, the template from an email perspective is unlimited number of characters, and you can change it to suit you. Now, one thing I will recommend, if you have been using vSure for an extended period of time, the default template may not mention anything about 8105 primary student visas and the collection of their course dates. You may want to update your template to specify course dates. And this is my sample data, and I haven't done that. So what we would recommend is coming in and checking this template is up to date. You'll also notice that you've got the ability to tailor your footer of your emails. Make sure that's got your details in it, not ours. The system does default to our details, but it really should be your team. The other thing I want to bring to your attention with the templates is these mail merge fields. So if you're familiar with Microsoft Word, there is this concept of mail merge. Well, anything in these square brackets that's listed up here can be used as a part of the template. Now, some of you who do run multi-venue or multi-store, it's a good idea to put, say, the sender name plus the location in your template. And then that way it would say Baker's Delight at Katara, as opposed to just Baker's Delight as a way of identifying where that person is applying for the job or is going to work. The difference with SMS is there is a limitation. In Australia, that limitation is 320 characters. In New Zealand, the limitation is 160 characters. It's purely about the cost of SMS in New Zealand versus Australia. We software developers, for your interest, still pay SMS costs in 160 character increments, and hence why it is a factor of 160 characters. But again, the merge fields apply within the SMS. There are 4 templates of both email and SMS. One is the initial onboarding template. One is the reminder that goes out if they haven't completed within 1, 2, 3, 7 days, and we'll talk about the settings in a minute. One is a thank you, which is, hey, when they complete it, we're going to send them an email and or SMS to say thanks for completing it, so that they know that their information has been received. And the other one is a common one, which is notification to the employee of where they update their passport. If they do have a new passport and they haven't told Home Affairs about it, there's a template there to be able to send them that link. Now, one thing that we will be doing before the end of the year is allowing you to add custom templates. At the moment, we've limited to those 4 templates, but we have structured it in a way that we'll be able to add templates over time. Some of those examples are a template for primary student visa holders and the collection of course dates, where you just want to send out the course evidence date request, which we'll talk about later in the session. Then effectively, that'll be a template that you'll be able to set up. So we will add an unlimited number of templates into the system. One thing I'll just bring to your attention is we can send the SMSs from you. At the moment, they'll come from vSure, or they'll come from Right to Work, or they'll come from RTW Check. Effectively, that's a setting within the SMS template as to where that is being sent from. There's a drop-down list there. We can, with application, send it on your behalf. So if you're a brand, as long as it's less than 11 characters, it can come from you. But we will go through a processing, and there is a $150 processing fee for us to set that up with the Australian Communication and Media Authority. Just quickly, we jump into My Account settings. Within the My Account settings, we basically have the ability to specify how vSure works. There's a number of things in here to bring to your attention. One thing I will highlight is this document purge limit. For cybersecurity reasons, we don't necessarily want to keep copies of passports, birth certificates within the vSure platform. We would encourage you that you don't legally have to keep it, and that effectively it reduces the cybersecurity risk over time if we aren't storing those documents at all. The obligation for work rights is to cite the documents. It is not to keep those documents. And I think a lot of you will have experienced staff who are hesitant to provide documents. The comfort that those documents will not be kept ultimately generally helps with them supplying those documents. But you get to determine that. Our default setting is we purge the documents after 3 months, but you can determine how quickly after collecting the documents that we would be purging those documents. And that can be anywhere from do not purge, so we don't delete them while the account remains active, anywhere up to 84 months, which is the 7 years. That's something that you control, not vSure. It's up to you and your internal policies and procedures around PII documents. The other thing I'll bring to your attention is the color orange occurs on this setting, visa expiry warning days. So visas will turn orange important. The default is 90 days. You can shorten that to 60 days or blow it out as far as 180 days. So whatever setting you want around the conversion of a green okay to an orange important, that is the setting that's there. I mentioned this before, you can set the frequency of the rechecks of your temporary visas, noting that this one here, auto check critical status visas, is 14 days out from expiry, where most substantive visas will be in place if they are granted, 14 days out from expiry of the previous visa. The exception is bridging visas, which won't show until the day after the previous visa. So this setting here, 14 days out from expiry, we'll recheck the visa, and then the day after the visa, we'll recheck the visa, which is to pick up the bridging visa. Now, we have noticed since about the 29th of August, Home Affairs has been very slow in showing bridging visas. It used to be always there the morning after the previous visa expired, the bridging visa will show. We're seeing it take up to 48 hours. And there has been periods where the visa shows as no visa, and then within the 48-hour window, the bridging visa finally shows. So what vSure is now doing is we don't just check the day after. If we check the day after and it brings up no visa, we'll check the next day and the next day and the next day. We'll continue to check for 3 days after automatically to accommodate this sort of fault in the Home Affairs system at the moment. Regional employers, we ask you to mark yourself as if you are in a designated regional area, which is a specified thing by Home Affairs. We do mark regional visas as yellow, and I'll talk about 491s in a minute. Yellow as in it's a restricted visa. They can only work in a regional area. If you are in a regional area and you're only in a regional area, you don't necessarily want that to be showing up all the time as yellow. And so you can mark yourself as being in a designated regional area. I'll talk about the onboarding wizard settings in a moment. I called out the PII data. Moving into the system, there are 2 types of users in vSure, an admin user and a user. The only difference between the two is an admin can add other users, a user cannot, and an admin can change the settings that we've just talked about. A user cannot change settings, okay? The other thing is that admin and users can exist at each level of a multi-account. So there are admins and users at the top level, and there are admins and users at the sub-account level. The other thing about a user in a multi-account environment, you do need to provide specific access to the sub-accounts. You do need to tick which sub-accounts that they get access to. By default, adding a new user in a multi-account environment will give them no access to any sub-account. So you do need to basically add them and then nominate which sub-accounts you want them to get access to. I do highlight that users can be moved. They can be moved between sub-accounts. They can be moved between sub-account and top level, etc. We do stress that user management is the responsibility of the administrators at your account. There is a cybersecurity risk to us getting help desk tickets for people asking us to add users or change user access to admin, etc. So we really push back on any requests that we get via support tickets to manage users. Now, if you get stuck and there are no admins or there are no admins available, then by all means you can log support tickets and we will go out of our way to help you, but we will need some sort of formal acknowledgement via email or a formal letter that basically gives us comfort that we are helping you and we're not basically providing an external party or a user with access that they're not supposed to have. So we should know who the admin users are and they should be the only ones who administer the account. I will just say here that if you have multi-account, there is the concept of subscribing. So even if you're given access to accounts, you do need to subscribe to get the reports. And subscribing is a good way to put them on the default list when you log in. We default to the subscribe list. I just want to highlight a couple of things. Search and filter. So there's a couple of ways to filter in vSure and find employees. The quick and easy way is the filter. I want to find someone called Tom. I can just type in Tom and it will filter down. And it looks for anywhere that the letters TOM appear together within the file. A new feature we added is the ability for that to save. If I basically go away to a different tab and then I come back, it will still be filtered on Tom. That was a request from some customers. It does cause support tickets. We've had a few people sort of contact us to say, where have all my employees gone? If you do find that you're missing some employees in your list, maybe have a look and clear your filter. That's a good way to basically bring them all back. The other feature we have is search. Now, if you're trying to find someone, you don't know whether they're previous, current, or prospective, you can come into the search area and you can do some rather complex searches. There is some search instructions here which talk to you about how you do that. But let me give you a little cheat. The best way to learn how to do searches is to come to your dashboard and, for example, say, hey, I just want to know who my 500 student visas are. If you click on the graph, the way that we get you to the data is by doing the search. So a good way to learn the criteria around how you do searches in vSure is to actually do it from the dashboard and then effectively copy. See here, this is a 500 student visa. Say I just wanted to have a look for anyone who's on an 010 bridging visa. All I've had to do there is basically change my filter, my search. Now, search exists both for employees and search also exists for onboarding within the system here. So that's search and filter. Just a note, by default, vSure uses our connection to Home Affairs to do your visa checks. From June this year, we took away the ability for sub-accounts to use their own Vivo accounts. This was related to multi-factor authentication. If we do have police or Home Affairs contact us about a visa check that's run, and this does happen from time to time, if there's a missing person or if there's someone overstaying their visa and you have checked them, we do have a legal obligation to advise them of who had run the check, and we do keep a tally of that. If you do want to use your own Vivo account, it is still possible. And we do have customers who are doing this. We just need to go through a process of setting that up. So some of our customers have had orders from Border Force where they want them to use their own Vivo account. Just be known that it is possible and we can set that up for you. If you do have a New Zealand account, there is no other option. New Zealand Home Affairs does, or New Zealand Immigration does require us to do all checks on behalf of you and not do them for vSure. But there's a couple of ways of doing that. There are about 7 different ways to do onboard or an initial right to work check in vSure. The most recommended ways these days is self-onboarding or the employer wizard. I just wanted to bring to your attention that you get to customize what those flows look like. Under my account, you'll see a whole heap of settings here around how onboarding and the employer wizard is structured. If you don't want to show the selfie, then you can get rid of it. If you don't want to collect student visa information, which I wouldn't recommend, but if you didn't want to do that, you can turn it off. If you don't want to collect course evidence date because you're going to restrict everyone to 48 hours, then it doesn't need to be on. If you don't want to collect certain things like a DFTTA, for example, you never see them, let's not confuse people, let's turn it off. You want to set the auto reminders to send not daily after, maybe we'll leave it 2 or 3 days before we send them. That's all controlled by you within the My Account settings if you are using that. Moving on. Probably the number 2 most reason we get support tickets is this visa check's not working. Okay, and I just, I kind of laugh sometimes when people say the visa check in vSure doesn't work, but it does work if I manually do it with Vivo. Never once has that been true. Okay, vSure and Vivo have the same source of data. You cannot possibly get a different result in vSure to what you get by doing it manually in Vivo. So my recommendation is never revert to Vivo thinking you're going to get a different result. In 100% of the cases where you do get a different result, it's because the inputs are different. Okay, you've used a different passport number or a different date of birth. They are the same source of data. So why does a visa check fail in Australia and New Zealand? Well, not more than 90% of the time, it's because the data's not exactly right, i.e. there's a 0 instead of a letter O or vice versa. There's a number 1 instead of the letter L. It's day, month, should be the way it's done, and they've done it month, day as their date of birth. There's only 3 points of data that you need to check for a Vivo check or a New Zealand Visa View check, and those are the 3 reasons or points you should check to make sure that the visa check does work. If it doesn't work, and you're 100% certain that those 3 data points are right, and you're convinced that the person does have a visa, then check the issue date of the passport. 95% of the time that a visa check doesn't work and we are confident this person does have a visa, it's because they've given you a passport that Home Affairs doesn't know about. Okay, so that's why in our onboarding, we do have a little button there to send them the link to Home Affairs to update. If you send them the link, come back and check tomorrow. If they've updated their passport with Home Affairs, the visa will work. Fixing the data, sending the link for new passports fixes the problems 99% of the time that we get support tickets for, or the visa check doesn't work. Another one that does work, does happen, is that if they've got an IMI card or a DFTTA, keep in mind that there can be 2 different countries listed on the DFTTA in particular, the refugee camp where they came from, and also their country of origin. Note that a visa check is against the citizenship country, not where the refugee camp is. So one of the most common things we've seen come up where the visa check isn't working is that you're entering the country as Australia for the IMI card. It's never Australia, it's always the country of citizenship. Or if it's a DFTTA, they're entering the refugee camp country and not the country of citizenship. So that's just a little trick. The other one is that they're actually now become a citizen. The reason the visa check's not working is because they actually don't have a visa anymore because they're a citizen. If you've gone through all of that and there's no other reason why that visa is failing and you're 100% certain, then I would get the visa grant letter and check what passport information was on the visa grant letter. That will fix most of the problems because that'll show you what is different about what you're doing and where the visa is actually applied. If all else fails, you can lodge a Vivo inquiry. I will say this is literally less than 1 in 2,000 times we've been asked this, but if you do keep getting that, you've looked at the visa grant letter, you don't know why you can't find the visa, then you can lodge a Vivo inquiry directly with Home Affairs. This can happen if the person, for example, is an at-risk person who Home Affairs doesn't allow Vivo checks to work for because of they're in hiding or whatever. And the other is there's literally been a mistake made by Home Affairs. In New Zealand, this is actually very common and you will just need to contact Immigration New Zealand. It is just one of those things that their system is less reliable than the Australian system, I will say. One thing that you may or may not be aware of is the ability to request documents directly from employees. Under employees, if I go into their profile, if I have an email address and/or mobile number against their employee profile, then when I go to the documents tab and I hit request documents, then I can request any of these documents in a very similar way that I can do self-onboarding. The most common ones is their new passport, a citizenship certificate, or in the case of students, collecting their course evidence date or COE. These documents are all collectible using the same sort of process flow as the self-onboarding. They will come in, they will need review. Once reviewed, they'll update the employee profile. You can do this en masse. So the most common use case for this is, it's now February. We have lots of primary student visas on staff and we want to know what their term dates are for this year. An easy way to do that, you'll see this little filter button here, restricted 8105. These are all my restricted primary visa holders. You could have hundreds. If you select all, you'll now see this request document button, and I can come in and request any documents from my staff en masse. As I said, the most common use case for this would be course evidence date, and it will take me through the flow, and I can do en masse collection of documents for all those staff. If historically, for example, you haven't collected the COE from students, you could use this as a way to collect those COEs. I'm really conscious that I've run over time, and I'm just going to whip through a few things here. 6-month rule is something we get a lot of questions about. 417s, 462 working holiday visas. The rule is 6 months per employer location. There are 5 industries and geographical areas exempt from this rule at the moment. If you are exempt, then please mark yourself as exempt in the My Account settings. You'll see in the My Account settings, working holiday, 6-month limit, exempt. If all of your staff are exempt, then please mark this as yes. Okay, and then we have 2 dates against the employer, work rights date and a visa expiry date. This is primarily for these working holiday visas. We do calculate the 6-month rule. It does display as the work rights expiry date as opposed to the VIVO expiry date, which is the expiry of the visa. Now, there is a calculation for that. The important thing is that the work rights expiry date is the lesser of the VIVO expiry date, or 6 months plus the greater of start date, recommencement date, or visa grant date. Now, the 6-month rule resets with every visa that is granted, and the 6-month rule can be recalculated based on a recommencement date. So if the person moves location, you update vSure with the recommencement date of when they moved that location, run a visa check, and the system will automatically recalculate 6 months from that recommencement date. Now, we do have some clients where only certain staff, because of the industry they work in, are allowed to be exempt from the 6-month rule, so they can't make the whole account exempt. There's 2 options. You can have sub-accounts, one which is your 6 months exempt staff, and one which is the not exempt, or you can just manipulate the recommencement date to allow those people who are exempt from the 6-month rule. So you just basically put the recommencement date in to recalculate the work rights expiry date. The 180-day rule on a 482, this is a new legislation where someone can remain in the country up to 180 days and work without a sponsor. In order to calculate the 180-day rule, we need to know when they were last sponsored. If you are a sponsor of 482s, then we need to know that you are the sponsor, and there is a flag on the employee file that indicates that you are the sponsor. So you'll see some errors against 482s. It all relates to this 180-day rule and the calculation of work rights. Hopefully that makes sense. Something that we emailed about last week, it's been brought to our attention that the 8597 condition currently does not show on work rights checks for 491 visas. The 8597 condition is must work in a designated regional area. For whatever reason, Home Affairs does not show this condition on 491 visas at the moment, even though every 491 visa should have this condition. It is only against work rights checks that it doesn't show. If you do a MARA agent check, or if the individual does their own check, they will see the 8597 condition. To deal with this, we have, as of last week, now changed 491 visas to automatically show the 8597 condition, even though the VIVO check does not. So when you run the checks in vSure, they will flag as restricted unless you've marked yourself as a regional employer. Student visas 500. A Vivo check is never enough, and so that's why we collect things like COEs and course evidence date. A Vivo check won't tell you when the course starts, won't tell you what level of course that it's doing. There are rules around student visas and their work hours. A primary is always restricted, is not restricted during holidays. A secondary is always restricted regardless of whether holidays or not. A primary is exempt if they're doing a master's or PhD specifically by research. They are not exempt if they're only doing masters by coursework. But secondaries are exempt if the primary is doing a master's either by research or coursework or a PhD. Very confusing, but vSure takes care of that if you do collect the COE and we do get the nomination of the level of the course. We will mark them as yellow restricted if they fall outside the exemptions, which is these three here. Oh, yes, I must say 8104s don't always mean 48 hours. There is an 8104 condition on a 407 training visa, which still means 40 hours. We have lodged a complaint to Home Affairs about this being stupid because if they're on a bridging visa and they have the 8104 condition, we actually don't know which 8104 condition applies. Is it 40 hours or is it 48 hours? And it relates to the visa they held before. And if you didn't do the visa check on the visa they held before in vSure, there's no way for us to know what their previous substantive visa was and whether they're limited to 40 hours or 48 hours. All it would take is Home Affairs to come up with a new code for the 407 training visa. It could be 8109 or something like that, and then we would know on a bridging visa which applies. All I highlight to you, be careful with bridging visas and the 8104 condition. They may not always be 48 hours, and it could be 40 hours, and you will need to get evidence of what the previous visa was to know exactly what their limitation is. Reports, we get often asked about reports. We've talked about a couple of reports already. One thing I will say is you may or may not have ever clicked on this cog. With this cog, you can move your columns around, you can delete columns, you can do what you want with the columns in your employees, contractors area. Okay, so you can come into here. This is a list of all my current employees. I might want to move around my columns or delete columns that I don't want. And then when I hit on the Excel button, it's going to basically, what you see is what you get gets taken out to Excel. Okay, so that's one way of writing reports. You basically just come in here, you use the cog, you put the columns in the order that you want, and then you output to Excel. There's obviously the reports I've talked about, which is the visa backed report, the alerts report. The other one, which is the visas held report. This is the one that's important for labour hire companies and sponsors. It gives you the list of visas held based on the date ranges of start and finish dates of your employees. I will bring your attention that we do now have a custom report module which can automate the sending of reports. It is a customization above and beyond the system. There is a cost on the module and a setup fee, but if you do want more reports than are currently capable of the system, then talk to us. If you do want to automatically email reports, for example, to your stores on a weekly basis around what visas at their store, those sorts of things are possible within the automated reporting tool. Integrations, we love integrations. Most of the people on the call have vSure integrated to something. We do have out-of-the-box integrations and we do have custom integrations capable. If you do want to integrate vSure, talk to us. Just some key enhancements. New Zealand's been the biggest enhancement. Even those who have started using New Zealand, we have just been approved to send SMS in New Zealand. So very shortly, you'll be able to send SMSs at a cost. The pay rate from the visa approval letter is now being extracted so you know what the pay rate is and it can be exported from the employee file. We've added gender, which was a field required for New Zealand. We added that for you, Anna. If you're still on the call, you did ask me about that. So gender is now a field within Australia as well. And there's an extra field called the external ID field. Both of these have been now added to the CSV uploads within the system. You can also change the status of your employees, current, previous, prospective now from the CSV upload. We have moved our OCR engine. That is when you upload a picture, it extracts data from the passport. That was previously done by Google. The problem Google gave us is that they did that in America or the EU. They didn't do it in Australia. For some clients, that was a data sovereignty issue. We now do that in Australia using AWS. So all data for vSure is hosted in Australia. We do offer single sign-on. That's something that we've offered since March. And we do offer data isolation. So basically, some clients, because of the medical industry they work in or others, do require our data to be segregated, and that is possible. We do have lots of integration enhancements. We've done our integration to Tanda, which is our most common one. There's been a lot of improvements in that over the last few months. I'm just conscious of time. I'll just bring to your attention some options with vSure. I've talked about multi-account a bit today. Most of the people on the call do have multi-account. You can use multi-account for various reasons. I mentioned SMS sender ID can be from you rather than vSure. You can have your own Vivo account in vSure. Talk to us if you do need to use that. There is New Zealand available. There is single sign-on available. We do just basically do it at cost. It costs us $100 a month to give an enterprise SSO connection through our provider Auth0. We're happy to give you that at cost, which is 160 Australian dollars roughly. I mentioned data segregation. That does require some cost and some discussion around that. By all means, give us a chat. If you do want integrations, the next integration coming is Deputy. And the one after that, by the end of September, we hope, is Elmo. It just comes back to how much Elmo plays with us on getting their sandbox sorted. And then there's a few others in the pipeline, Payroll Metrics and Hi Bob. Hopefully get them done before the end of the calendar year. I do note all features in vSure come from ideas from customers. Some features that apply to all will just get added at no cost. Just tell us the idea, and if we think it's a good one, we'll always add it. If there's some ideas that really only apply to a subset of our customers, then there still can be an option to get that feature added. We do call it customer-funded development. If there is something that's really annoying you or you do want, by all means, just ask. The worst we can say is no, we're not going to do it, or yes, we can do it, but it's going to be on this timeline at this cost, etc. I am conscious of the time, but I am going to stay on. I really got my timing wrong today. Apologies for that. But if there's any questions, please ask away. Put your hand up. There is the sort of raise hand, or use the chat and we can ask any questions. Well, thank you all for your patience. If anyone did want to stay on or ask a question, I haven't seen any questions come through yet. Happy to stay online for a bit longer. Otherwise, thank you very much. Apologies for running over time. We will allocate an hour for the next one, as opposed to underestimating how long it takes me to talk about everything.
Excellent.